All right. Hello, everyone. This is Preston Clark. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at LawRoom. With me today, I have Eitan Clower, Jeremy Beckman, and Dr. Pax Haymeyer, who doesn't like it when I call him doctor, but because we're coworkers, I'm going to anyway today. The title of the webinar today is How to Build an Effective Data Security Training Program. The three gentlemen in the room with me today have spent the last about 5 months developing an online data security training program, and certainly these three gentlemen are in the, this is their profession to build courses, but every time we build a new one, we learn a great deal about the complexities and the nuances, both from a course development to learning objectives to a technology standpoint, and we know that for many of you, and by the way, we have a great turnout. Looks like we're up to 140 attendees so far. For many of you, maybe you're doing something already internally, maybe you've built it yourself, maybe you're using a third-party vendor. Whatever the approach is, we all know that there's a heightened risk and concern surrounding data security now more than ever. It's in the news every single day. And so how you go about developing and deploying an effective data security training program is important to your business, and that's why we're here today, and that's what I'm excited to talk about with these guys who are very good at what they do and are very passionate about what they've just built. And so this is a good opportunity coming right. They've been working a lot of 18-hour days, so if they speak slowly, that's why, but they've built something that's great, and they have a lot of really fresh insight into some of the challenges they faced, and I'm hoping that that's useful for those that have joined us today. A little bit of blocking and tackling before we get started. So this will run an hour. We'll do a hard stop at the top of the hour. There's a white paper handout that gives some insight around data security training that's not specific to anything that we've built, but is more general learnings and a summary of what we learned in developing our program. You can download that. It's on the right sidebar down there at the bottom where it says handouts. There's also a video that gives you a snapshot of what the look and feel of our own course. You're welcome to look at that afterwards. We will be recording the event today, so keep an eye out for that. Probably tomorrow or a bit later in the week, we'll wrap everything together in an email and send everything out with the white papers, with the promo video, and with the recording, and of course with the PowerPoint slides that we'll be touching on as well. You're welcome to submit questions now. You can submit questions throughout the event. We'll carve out some time at the end for questions if we don't get to them during the regular flow of the webinar today. I think that's basically it. I don't think I'm missing anything from a blocking and tackling standpoint. We will be posting some information via Twitter, hashtag data security. Guys, am I forgetting anything? We good? Okay. So let's get started here. By way of introduction, I'd like to first introduce Dr. Haymeyer. He's one of our lead instructional writers here. Really the brains behind a lot of the research and client outreach to determine what was going to go into and what some of the learning objectives were going to be for our data security course. So let me read his bio. He's an instructional writer for LawRoom. Pax works closely with organizations across the country to develop training solutions that help meet their needs. He has helped develop numerous online courses at LawRoom, including supervisor anti-harassment, conflicts of interest, ethics, substance abuse prevention training. He has over 8 years of classroom teaching experience and a PhD in English. See, there's the doctor. And a PhD in English literature from UC Santa Barbara. Pax, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Preston.
Next up on the list, Jeremy Beckman, VP of Product Design. As VP of Product Design, Jeremy is responsible for the design and strategic. Oh, sorry, do we have a technical issue? We have an audio issue?
No, he just
Just a slow transition in the slide.
Yeah, so sorry. So I'm going to be yeah, the slide transition, I may not keep up. As VP of Product Design, Jeremy is responsible for the design and strategic direction of online training products for LawRoom and Campus Clarity, which is our university brand. He's developed numerous programs, including sexual harassment, bullying, substance abuse, sexual violence, and data security. Prior to LawRoom, Jeremy was a designer for Allen Interactions, where he consulted enterprise clients in the creation of custom online training programs such as sales management and leadership skills and cognitive behavioral therapy. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Visualization from the Minneapolis School of Art and Design. Jeremy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Last but not least, VP of Product Development, Eitan Clower, and my favorite Twitter cohort. As the VP of Product Development at LawRoom, Eitan's job is to deliver products that address the most important problems in training delivery and learning management. His interests vary widely, but these days, when he isn't planning LawRoom's product development roadmap, reviewing feature prototypes, or tending to his Twitter addiction that I'm sure I helped propel, he can usually be found eating ice cream at Lottie's with his kids. Eitan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Okay. With that, Pax, I want to get started and ask you some questions about the development of the course and get your insight, because I know there's a lot of, obviously the building blocks of any course is the writing. What goes in, what are the learning objectives, what's going to go into the development of the program. So let's just sort of get this started. For those looking to develop their own data security program in-house, what's your advice on how to approach that project, and who within an organization should be involved?
Well, let me flip that question around and start with who should be involved, because I think probably the first step would be getting the right people in the room. And at an organization, if company, probably you want to think about people like HR, chief technology officers, chief security officers, if you have them, and maybe some other C-level executives. And the reason for that is twofold. One, you want to bring everyone the necessary expertise to bear on the problem. So you obviously want someone in HR who has experience training employees, implementing policies. You also, of course, want the CTO, someone who has experience actually dealing with these particular issues, the kinds of data breaches that your particular company has been facing, and more broadly, a kind of a larger domain expertise on these issues. And then in terms of the other people, someone like other C-level executives, maybe your CEO, is because you're also going to need to develop buy-in around the project, and you're going to be able to make and build a business case for a data security training program. And so it's really important that you have at the outset, all those people in the same room talking about the needs and why this is important for the company. And I think a lot of you, if you're here already, you probably have a good sense of why this is an important issue. I mean, if you're reading any kind of news, you've seen there have been a whole host of breaches this year at a variety of organizations. So, it's obviously been in the news a lot. It's also something that in an increasingly digital world, more and more organizations are effectively data companies. And so it's a very important issue. You're going to want to get everyone together, make that business case. And then again, the expertise. And one of the challenges that we have encountered as we talk to clients is that sometimes the responsibility for something like a data security training program seems to kind of fall between the cracks. So when we talk to HR people, they'll say, well, this is really not in our domain. This is something that security professionals want to talk about, and we do these other things. And then when you go and talk to a CTO, they'll say, well, this is really about employee training, and so this isn't something that we deal with. We deal with the technology that protects our networks and our systems. And so in getting them together, what's important to help them realize is that it's actually everybody's problem. So in terms of HR, it's your responsibility to train employees and to make sure that policies, good policies are developed and followed. And so, of course, this issue is going to fall under your domain. You have the expertise in terms of reaching out to employees. You're aware of what other training programs are happening and being developed, so you can sort of give a good assessment of the attention of your employees, what they're already doing, what the policies are, and already have some insight in how, in the past, you've done effective training around other policies. In terms of the CTOs, it's important to point out to them that a lot of data security issues are not just technology. They also have a strong human element, whether that's kind of employee negligence or carelessness, or their gullibility, right? Their ability to be influenced or persuaded by someone who's trying to trick them into divulging sensitive information. And this isn't just us. This is something that came up very early in our research, both talking with clients, but also in just looking at other resources that are out there. So Cisco, in their 2015 annual security report, just published a new security manifesto, and one of the principles of that is that security must be viewed as a people problem. They say a technology, I'm quoting here, a technology-centric approach to security does not improve security. In fact, it exacerbates that. And so that you need to improve a dialogue between security professionals and your HR and the rest of your company. And one way that you can frame this to a CTO if you're having trouble getting buy-in is to point out the kind of opportunity cost. So for every human issue that they're dealing with, and when you talk to security professionals, most of them are human issues. So it's, according to one survey by the Ponemon Institute, something like 35% of the breaches they deal with are lost laptops and other devices. So every time you're dealing with a lost laptop, you have less time to spend on those technology issues that you feel are very important. So it's important to express that these two kinds of approaches complement each other, both the human training, the employee training, as well as the technology solutions. Just a small reduction in the number of lost devices you're dealing with or the number of phishing links that your employees are clicking on frees up a lot of time to do other things and to pursue other initiatives and programs. So once you have that team assembled, the next step is to begin the kind of analysis and to talk about the expertise, and sort of gather together all that expertise that is in that room.
So let me, before you go deep on that, I just want to I guess, touch back on something you said. So okay. you articulated the divide in ownership, right? Or
right.
Some, should it be an HR, should it be the CTO, and there's different reasons why one should own it versus the other. But as we talk about the development of a program, the internal ownership, are we seeing from conversations with clients that there's a typical owner within the organization, or is it something that because it touches so many different parts of the organization that it's really it's almost like a chief learning officer rather than someone who's specifically security or specifically HR?
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges of developing it in-house is that ownership issue. And so it would be ideally someone like a chief learning officer, I would think. If you're choosing between HR and CTO, one way to think about it is kind of dividing up the expertise. So if the HR has that experience in training employees, they can own the development of the product. But if the expertise and the domain knowledge lives with the CTOs, then they're really they're in a sense the clients. They're the people who the HR is going to be presenting the training to, so they can vet it and approve it. So, and we did something a little bit like that internally as well. Is one of the sort of steps in the process of developing our own solution. We worked with our people in IT as well. So you can, if you're having trouble with that ownership issue, I think you can think of what are the different roles and who can best fill that role. So if there's again, I'm just sort of repeating myself, but if there's someone who is going to own the learning solution, that could be HR. And if there's someone who's going to own the sort of domain expertise, that could be the CTO or someone else in the organization. And the advantage of that is, if you're trying to own both the expertise and the kind of learning solution, that can be a very overwhelming to one individual or even one group within the company. And by separating it out, you can not only that specialization can be very effective and very productive in terms of creating good training.
Got it. Okay, that's great. I didn't know I cut you off there a minute ago. So another question, going on the path of development. You've obviously been involved, as when I was reading your bio, in the development of other courses, ethics, anti-harassment, very conduct-based for organizations and for universities. So someone who has that experience, was there anything unique about developing a data security training course that is different from maybe some of the other courses we've developed as a company in the past?
Well, I would say in the end, the surprise were in the end were the similarities. So initially, in any of these kinds of problems, as you do the analysis, you see the uniqueness of the problem, you see the sort of the specifics. But as you really dig deeper at the core, I think a lot of these issues are similar to what we're talking about around compliance or conduct, which is behavior issues, changing attitudes, changing beliefs. That said, I think we already have a lot of compliance courses that are based around similar issues. So things like FERPA, red flags of identity theft, which meets the FTC's, I forget exactly what is the identity theft prevention program. We have payment card industry data security standards. So we have a lot of very compliance-based courses around these issues. So one of the nice things about this project, and one of the things that was exciting, is that we really got to think of what kind of program can we build that really complements these compliance-based courses, which have a lot of information? What are the behaviors and attitudes that we can focus on improving and developing in employees? We also had a lot of client feedback on those courses already. So that was something that was new and sort of interesting about this approach. We had gotten a lot on FERPA. Well, this is really important, but these are other issues that we're facing. So we had a good perspective already based on some of those courses. So let me give you an example. I mean, we got a lot of feedback that these data, a lot of these issues around data security were important, and a lot of the information was important, but what they were facing on a day-to-day basis were phishing scams. I mean, we were getting this from a lot of our EDU clients, that they were saying, we have hundreds of phishing emails, and I'd love to see more coverage of that topic. So this was an opportunity for us to really dive into that and to explore that issue in more detail.
Yeah, and I know that from personal experience in talking to a few of our clients about that, what they had seen was that they had started approaching phishing training, and I'm not sure if they had gotten modules or if they had built something in-house or using an outside vendor, but the examples that they were using to teach on phishing scams were already outdated, right? Because the scammers that are coming out with the strategies on phishing, it evolved, right? It's not the Nigerian prince anymore, right? It's like the evolution of it means that they're getting more advanced in the technology and the approach and the strategy, and so the training sort of needs to keep pace with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and we found that as well in our research, and so that's going to be one of the challenges. One of the things that's exciting for us is we'll have that opportunity to improve and to get feedback on this course and improve those examples. The other side of that, and sort of talking maybe a little bit more about the approach that we took, is you can't predict every single phishing email that's going to go out there. You can't give them a comprehensive list of the examples of phishing emails. So what you have to do is come back to sort of first principles, I don't know if that's the right term, but principles about how to identify, how to spot these kinds of scams. And so we have a lot of examples of phishing emails, and we have a lot of up-to-date examples based on what people were seeing today. But what we also tried to do is explain, what those emails, what those phishing scams represented, what were sort of the principles of persuasion that the scammers were using, so that even if those principles or the exact sort of manifestation of them changes, if the email changes a little bit, if it becomes more sophisticated, they still have some guideposts for helping identify them. And so one of the interesting things actually about that particular interaction is we ended up approaching it in a way that might have seemed counterintuitive to some teachers. So we started with kind of a holistic approach, and in fact, it's kind of the hook for the course. As you start out with, we say, well, test yourself. Let's see how good you are at this. And we throw at the user a few phishing examples, and we ask them to identify whether it's legitimate or phishing. And this is to get people engaged, to also get them to realize if they're not getting it right, that this is something that they need to be trained on. But it also gave us an opportunity to embed within those emails and the feedback to those interactions some insight into what identifies these emails as phishing or not phishing. And so it's a kind of a holistic approach. And then at the end of the course, and we come back to this issue at several points in the course, but at the very end, instead of doing that holistic, is this a phishing or is this a legitimate email, we're asking employees to focus in on specific elements and identify the specific elements of an email that indicate it's a phishing email. So we kind of went from the whole picture to these very small, specific details. And that's counterintuitive, because you might think, all right, identify the specific aspects of this email that indicate it's phishing and then determine whether it's phishing or not. But in many ways, when we come back to those principles, what we wanted them to be able to do was to look at an email, scan it, and assess, okay, these are the warning signs, these are the flags. And that's a very sophisticated and hard skill to develop. So, I don't know, I'm maybe sort of...
No, this is great. I think that one of the most enjoyable aspects of my job, other than that I like you guys personally, is that we're in the business of focusing and obsessing over not only what needs to be included in a course, but its design, its engagement, its delivery. What learning objectives are there? What modalities are we going to use? And I think that just hearing you talk the last 2 minutes in particular, you start to understand the amount of thought that goes into how you're going to accomplish the learning objective, right? It's not enough to say, hey, we need to train on fishing. It's what is going to be the best method of education that we can convey through an online platform that can achieve that goal. And that's something that I think it takes a lot of bandwidth and a lot of expertise to get there. And I'm glad you're on my team. So so with that, I'm going to do one more question for you, Pax, before we transition over to Jeremy. And I think the question is a good segue into the actual the aspect of how you design a course to accomplish the learning objectives you set out. And so with that, can you talk about some of the learning objectives? You talked about fishing already, I know. Any other big learning objectives? We certainly don't want to cover all of them at this moment, but some of the learning objectives that were specific to data security that were on your list from a training objective standpoint.
Well, so one of the things that we discovered, and we can go into this in more detail, and we already touched on it, is how much the human element played in data security breaches. So how much employee negligence, employee carelessness, or gullibility played into these. And Jeremy, I think, can probably touch on this in more detail, but in terms of learning objectives, it's important to think that it's not just a knowledge issue. It's much deeper than that. It's changing attitudes, behaviors, beliefs about some of these issues to really encourage employees to empower them to do these, sort of to follow data security best practices, to empower them and also to make them feel responsible for actually implementing them. So, we have a lot of experience, and when I said there was a lot of, in some of the other courses we've dealt with, we've tried to tackle similar issues, and so we've done a lot of work around bystander intervention, and I think we saw a lot of parallels to some of the work we were doing there with here, because in bystander intervention, often if you're in a situation, you may know that something's wrong or that something bad is happening, but you may not feel, there may be sort of psychological or situational pressures that prevent you from acting. So you may rationalize someone's misbehavior. You may feel like, the classic one is diffusion of responsibility. There may be 10 other people in the room, and so you feel like, hey, someone else is going to do it. It's not my responsibility. So there are all these other sort of psychological barriers that enter into it that prevent you from acting. And a great, example here would be something sort of very mundane. Say you walk out, to take a break, and there's a guy out there having a cigarette. He offers you a cigarette. He gives you a light, and you go to chatting. You like the guy, and then in the end he says, hey, I forgot my key. Can you let me into the building? And so overwhelmingly, I think most of us are going to do that, right? Because you in the first case, he's created a sense of obligation in you by offering something, a cigarette and a light that you've accepted. You've talked to this person. You like this person. We know from studying how people are persuaded that liking is one of those fundamental aspects that make someone persuasive. And so you may know, hey, it's company policy. I can't let this person in because I don't know who this person is. But you're being sort of overwhelmed by these other situational and psychological pressures, and you're going to let that person in. So one of the things that we've tried to do is look at those kinds of situations and think about, what are the ways that we can empower an employee to act on their instinct, to actually do what they already know is the right thing to do. It's, again, it's not a matter of having a sign there that says don't let people in, because people are going to ignore it, because they're going to be responding to the emotional context of the situation. So for us, it was, how do we empower them to act on what they already know, right? So some of it is telling them what they need to do, but a big part of that is giving them the tools to overcome those kinds of emotional pressures. And we did it in a lot of ways. We used videos, and this is something that you want to think about as you're setting your own learning objectives, is think about all the things at your disposal and how you can use them most effectively. And again, Jeremy can probably touch on this in more detail, but you might use a video, for instance, to model positive behaviors, but also to help recreate that kind of emotional context that an employee might face, either with a sort of an urgent call from a supposed IT professional or from requesting to be badged in. You can also give them scripts. We've done that as well, to sort of give them excuses and handy ways to say no to someone like that, and to still sort of be polite, because again, if there's chances are this person is just an employee there, and so you want to have a way of sort of preserving that kind of implicit social contract where they've given you something and now you need to do something in return. So some way to be polite, but still say no and follow company policy. So these kinds of behavioral and attitudinal challenges were a big part of what we focused on and thought about, and I think it has to be a huge part of any kind of learning program that you're going to create around data security.
That's awesome, Pax, and a perfect segue to ask a few questions to Jeremy Beckman, the man behind the team that builds many of the courses or most of the courses here at LawRoom, and award-winning designer in his own right. Realities did you focus on for data security, and what challenges did they pose that maybe were unique to data security?
Sure. So, all of the courses that we've been making recently really do, I think, a good job of effectively addressing all four modalities, those being visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic. But for this course, we focused on two of them primarily, and that is visual and kinesthetic preferences. So, for the visual preference, we used infographics as a way to simplify the communication itself, and also to help increase, I think, the ability to explain some complex ideas. An example of that is we have an infographic in the course that's called Anatomy of an Attack. And so what we do in this example is use a quasi sort of comic strip approach, but it's using, again, simplified infographic styles and the representations of people and so on. So we just focus on the details of the exchange. This is an example of a social engineering attack where there's someone who sends a phishing email. Someone inside the email is a link to a cat video, right? And so the employee sees this and thinks, oh wow, cool, a cat video. They click on the link, they watch the video, and while they're watching it, there's actually malware that's being uploaded to their computer, and it is actually giving an information thief access to information on that person's computer, right? And so we can use the infographic style as a way to tell these visual narratives, and to do so in a really quick and hopefully engaging and entertaining way that allow us to be able to accomplish the delivery of a lot of information in a very, and like I said, hopefully entertaining way. So of course, what are the challenges with doing something like that? Well, there's a famous quote that a number of historical figures have been attributed to, and that is, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter, right? When you take this approach, it actually requires a lot more concentration and consideration to accomplish it, right? So how do you condense a lot of information down to bite sizes without actually leaving out important details, right? So it takes a lot longer to take the core material itself and convert it into these visual or bite-sized narratives.
I want to take a pause just for a second, Jeremy. Some of the questions that are coming in, I want to address them, but I also want to acknowledge that maybe implicit in deploying and developing a data security training program is the data security policy and that formation and the work that goes into the development of that, because you certainly don't want there to be grave inconsistencies in your data security policy and your training, and ideally the data security policy would be intertwined into that. I know Eitan will talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but obviously there's a technology notion that you certainly would like people to be acknowledging that they've read a data security policy, but that's not my point. My point is that some of the questions coming in relate to, what should our rules be on this? How should we govern ourselves according to this? And those are, those are highly variable. Right, there's different businesses function different ways, or there's a question here on HIPAA. Obviously, there's PCI, there's all these different elements of data protection that are going to relate to your specific business, and you certainly want that policy, ideally in a perfect world, to be developed prior to a training so that it can inform and influence the development of the training. So sorry to sort of get sidetracked on that, Jeremy, but we have enough questions coming in that I think are being prompted by what should we do, what should our policy be, that I think that was worth mentioning, that in a perfect world that would be something that would be developed in advance of an actual training program.
Absolutely.
So moving on, and I think we've beaten this one already, and this has been covered, but I had it on my list. Certain learning objectives that pose challenges for you and your team, specifically in the context of data security.
So, I think that the most challenging objective was getting across the notion that actually data security is largely a human factors problem without disheartening or disparaging employees in the process, right? So how do you not point the finger or shake a finger at them, right? So it's more or less, how do you approach this in such a way by identifying those problems without blowing it, right? And so, Max, do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, so one side of that is sort of, and again, this comes up in some of our other trainings, is you want to, it's not a question of blame, it's kind of a question of anticipating and expecting certain kinds of issues to arise. So it's about just creating that expectation that it's not your fault to say, but these things happen, and exactly because they happen, we need to be prepared for them. And you read a lot of the sort of research that's out there, and a lot of data security experts, and what they'll say is, it's not a matter of if you're going to be breached or if you're going to be attacked, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And so it's, again, phrasing it in such a way that it's not blame, but it's like, this is something we just need to be prepared for. This is something that we should be expecting it. When they encounter a phishing email, it's not an unusual event. It's something that they've already anticipated, they've already thought through their response to.
Awesome. Okay. Good. This is a very emotional question. Obviously, I know you put a lot of time into the emotional component that goes into its development. What are you most proud of in the development of Checkpoint, our data security training program?
So there's lots to be proud of, and I think that that includes things like, I think, the effectiveness of the instructional interactivity in the course. I mean, it really provides great opportunity for learners to apply their learning and to actually simulate the decision-making process if they were to come across an email that is suspicious, as an example, or they end up on a website that something doesn't feel right. Well, how do you evaluate that? But I think that actually I feel most proud of the aspect that we've been able to create a course that I think actually contains a lot. It's a very broad set of issues, but yet we've been able to create it in such a way that it doesn't have a large footprint. The actual seat time has been reduced significantly without having to leave gaps in the learning experience itself.
Right, which goes back to the Mark Twain quote of, let's keep this. It's much harder to do it short, and especially to your point, without sacrificing some of the learning objectives, they're so crucial. When I look at the list of attendees on the webinar today, we have small businesses, we have mid-sized businesses, we also have a lot of really large corporations that have. If you ask them on a scale of 1 to 10 how significant data security was to the life of their business, they would say 10 all day long. And so they're listening here saying, listen, we're going to take this. We don't, we own this. We've been doing it for years. We have training infrastructure. We have a chief learning officer. We have a CSO. We have a CTO. We have a CHRO. We have this amazing leadership. So help us. Hey, Jeremy, you're the training expert. Help us in thinking through some of the challenges and objectives that we may have overlooked in the development of our program that you've learned through the development of Checkpoint.
I think there's three areas that I'd want to comment on that, and the first is to avoid the view that the data security problem can be solved by an awareness campaign. I mean, not to belabor the point, but I think Pax has already touched on this very, very effectively. But I want to emphasize this point that basically that awareness is just the beginning. You have to convert, I think, your energies into what should they be doing with this information, right? So provide a program that gives them the ability to actually apply it, right? So what do I mean by that? As an example, if it's, somebody is told, okay, so don't let people tailgate into the office. Don't tag them in with your badge. Sure, but how do you actually address that specifically, right? So how do you say no while also, like Pax was saying, be helpful to them and also perhaps avoid the awkward situation that is. As an example, what we actually suggest that people do is to ask them for their contact, right, and get the person outside in touch with them, right? That's a pretty effective way to get to basically skirt saying no, but I can't do that, but I can do this for you, right? But also I think that if the problem is really about changing behaviors, you need to also spread your message out, right? So that could mean a number of different things. So first of all, a single learning or training intervention isn't necessarily going to change behavior. You need probably multiple interventions, or you need to spread the messaging across multiple elements, which could, of course, include job aids that could be printed and put on a bulletin board. Could include things like call scripts that go to individuals who end up, on the phone with people and have, tricky conversations associated with sensitive information, as an example. But also, I think, secondly, combating the problem requires a shift in mindset. I think a useful way to do this is to make the suggestion that, we protect our information in a very, very much the same way we actually protect our valuables, right? This information actually is of great value and has great risk if it's actually compromised, right? So I think that we have to have, sort of an analogous mindset to the protection of information as we do with our valuables. We don't leave our things out in the open consciously, right? We lock our cars and our homes and so forth. We should do the same with information, right? So, and my third point, I think, is, and it may seem obvious, but I think it's important to emphasize this point. I really think that you should consider creating an online training program. Sure, you could actually create a blended approach where there's actually some online and some in person. That's great. But my point is largely that online training provides you with a great opportunity to be able to simulate the circumstances and the decision-making processes that people will actually be making. And training allows you to be able to do that very well if we're talking about virtual information, right? So in addition to that, though, is your ability to actually capture data from their performance within the course. So what does that give you? It gives you the ability to inspect and to analyze where the problem areas are and how you can actually help to address those particular problem areas, right? Knowledge problem areas perhaps, or behavioral, attitudinal problems, but then also to be able to improve the program over time, right?
Yeah, and so let me hit on a couple of things you said there. So first, and again, we're going to hear from Eitan in a second, but the notion that there's something specifically valuable about training data security through an online platform, whether it's homegrown or otherwise, because that is where the security lies, right? So you can have simulations that are occurring at your desk, which is where a lot of the risk takes place. Right. And we can't say that about our other courses, right? We can't say that about anti-harassment. We can't say that about ethics, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, etc. Like it doesn't jive in that way. And this scenario, it really does. It really makes sense that the platform through which you are going to be learning about data security is the platform through which the greatest risk lives and rests.
That's right.
The other thing that I think is worthwhile is, when we do these webinars, we try to manage expectations when we're sending out the invites in terms of what's going to be covered and what's going to be talked about. In this one, it was how to create an effective data security training program. And I'm thinking now that the word effective there's lots of different ways to talk about it, right, or to interpret it. And on one end, it's effective in terms of it's meeting the standards, the data security policies of our organization. It's meeting the PCI standards. It's meeting the HIPAA standards. It's meeting the NLRB standards. So whatever those standards might be. But as trained educators, as trained digital online educators, a lot of what goes into effectiveness is not just understanding what the objectives are and making sure that those objectives align with our internal policies and standards and best practices, but that also the deliverability, the engagement, the learning modalities are things that are contemplated in development. And I don't know to the extent that the folks who are on today see that as the big issue, right? Because for us, this is our business. Our business is to interpret something that needs to be trained on and to develop the best way to do that. And I think that for a lot of organizations, and we saw this in the university market when we came out with sexual violence prevention and substance abuse prevention, there was such an obsession with what the problem was that there wasn't that much obsession or focus on the most effective way to combat it or educate on it, and which is really what our expertise is. So don't mean to diminish one or the other, but I just want to give context to what we've been talking about today, in that our expertise is in the deliverability and effectiveness of training. And certainly we have to get it right as it relates to learning objectives, and we have to get it right in terms of what is trained on. But for us, we don't do our job effectively if this isn't reaching 100% of your organization, if you're not getting 100% completion rate, if you're not getting tracking that shows people are going through this and not just clicking through mindlessly, right? Because it's all for naught if we just develop and take a data security policy, embed it into a training program, let people click through in 5 minutes, and then have an acknowledgement form, and the insurance providers rest happy that someone has clicked through on something from a liability standpoint, but the effectiveness really hasn't occurred because that thoughtfulness didn't go into the design of the program. So I guess before I want to turn it over to Eitan, I want to talk about the deliverability aspect on that note. Before I do, anything else that we didn't get to cover from your perspective, Jeremy?
No, we covered it.
Okay, cool. Eitan Flower.
Hi.
Are you tweeting right now? Is there any tweeting going on?
No, I am respectfully paying attention to what we're doing here, and I'm not tweeting right now.
Awesome. Okay. I wouldn't blame you if you were. So I know that this question is a broad one, and it probably has a lot of components to it. But what considerations go into the deliverability, and understanding that deliverability has a pretty broad context here,
Sure.
Of a data security training course, understanding that your answer to the question may not be specific to data security, it may be training general, but nevertheless, you're the guy who runs the team for LawRoom, that deliverability is what matters. And so talk to us a little bit about what went into this.
Sure. So one of the main challenges that we face is how to ensure that the courses that we've just heard how much care and how much attention goes into designing the courses and ensuring that the right learning objectives are considered. Our challenge is to then how to deliver the course in the best possible way so that we can make good on all the work, all the design that goes into the course. And so the first thing I'd like to focus on is that we really try to insist on standard compliant technologies. And so this has several reasons for it, and I'll go into them. But the most kind of high level reason is that we need our courses to be fast. They need to allow for a lot of rich content and media, and they need to have maximum interoperability and cross-browser compatibility. So it's slower to develop the technology in this way, but it's kind of a you have to go slow to go fast kind of thing, where taking the time to really bake in the standard compliant technologies at the beginning, at the bottom level, really helps you down the line. Another thing that we really focus on is the performance of the courses. So we deliver our courses from CDN so that the courses are always available. They are hosted regionally to wherever the learner is downloading them from, and it makes them really fast. So we use AWS for the main course content, and we use a special cloud-hosted video delivery platform that allows us to provide progressively degenerative video experience. This is basically a fancy way of saying that the video is served in accordance to the bandwidth and device preferences of the learner. So no matter what kind of bandwidth, what kind of device, you're getting the best video experience possible.
And I know for a lot of our clients who have multi-locations, maybe they're international, there's certainly a lot of variables that go into what the user experience may be. It may be a device that's not even controlled by the organization, and so certainly doing the best to make sure that deliverability is high is a big part of it, especially for the larger, more complex organizations.
Sure, absolutely. So we know that we can't count on knowing what the device is. We can't count on knowing what the bandwidth conditions are. We can't count on knowing the geographical location of the learner. So these cloud-hosted CDN solutions really help us address those problems and make sure that no matter where, no matter what kind of connection, no matter what kind of device, we're getting the best experience. Another thing that standards compliance technologies help us achieve, and I think this is a really important and kind of often invisible feature. It's one that we have spent a lot of time and effort to develop, is accessibility. And so having a standards compliant, meaning standard HTML5 and CSS technology platform, allows us to make sure that our courses are all WCAG 2AA, WCAG 2AA compliant. This is a very high standard for accessibility. I think it's especially important in this kind of course where we know that we need to train everybody, and where a single weak link in the data security culture could spell disaster for an organization. It's really important that we are as inclusive as possible, that the courses are as accessible as possible so that everyone can be trained. We know that if a learner is accessing the course through a screen reader and the experience is very limited, that user is not going to be engaged, and is not going to be able to really benefit from the training. And we won't have achieved our mission, which is to train everyone and to really change the culture about data security. So what does this mean? We test all of our courses using JAWS and NVDA, which are the two most popular screen readers. We have a kind of training-specific content management system that enforces all content, ARIA attributes, contrast specifications. We test for correct tab indexing and kind of a logical tab flow through the courses, so that we know that these assistive technologies can provide a really good, usable experience through our course.
I know that we've covered such a broad spectrum in a very short period of time, and I just again I want to recontextualize this back to this notion that we can't have a conversation about developing an effective data security policy, developing an effective data security training program specific to our organization, and then ignore the question of deliverability, right? Because it's like I know that it's for many of us who are really passionate about data security specifically, deliverability probably isn't going to be the first thing on your mind. People who are really interested in educational design, deliverability isn't the first thing on your mind. It may be the second, but it's not the first. And so I just want to contextualize this again and say, Eitan, what you're charged with, if not for you, this doesn't happen, right? So we can do a good job of building something great, but if it's not readable on devices, if it's not accessible, if this cannot be received and opened and accessed by a vast workforce, and we have clients who service tens of thousands of employees or students, deliverability matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's often a challenge to, Pax and Jeremy were speaking earlier about the design, and especially Jeremy's designs often are ahead of what is practically, effectively deliverable, using the technology space that we're in. And so we have to really scramble, and we negotiate oftentimes about, is the technology ready for us to do, video branching scenarios, for example, or other, really rich, sophisticated media experiences, and so we're charged with delivering the really rich experiences that Jeremy designed. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. The last point that I want to touch on, and this brings the conversation on data security policies full circle. For us, how we function, this is just a part of our business, that there's a lot of policies and legal implications that require employees to click through, read, and acknowledge, not just for data security, but for anti-harassment and for other policies that are internal to an organization. So talk to us a little bit about, for obviously in the case of LawRoom specifically, we incorporate data security policies and acknowledgement forms into the training programs, but what are some other ways and how should companies be contemplating that, making that a part of the training program?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we have other courses that we've been presenting policies and recording acknowledgements for a long time, and we have a lot of expertise in that. We're now starting to develop kind of self-service tools for our clients to upload their own policies, and this has a couple of advantages. It means that when a policy changes, the client doesn't need us to affect that change in the training, and it also allows the client to have more control, not over the content. I mean, not just the content, but also the format of the policy. I think we're starting to empower the clients to upload their own policies better, to manage and own their own policies more within the context of our training.
I think something else from my perspective is that when you're putting in a policy into a training program where it's actually embedded, where you're asking someone to read it, you're asking someone to effectively sign it and acknowledge consent and acceptance of the policy, it also elevates the significance of the training program itself, right? These aren't just ancillary separate functions that are going on. What we're saying is that we're going to be training you on data security. We have a data security policy. We need you to read that. We need you to acknowledge that you've read it, and this is serious, and this matters to the organization. And PAX, bringing this full circle back to to some of the comments you led off with and some of the insights, there's a cultural problem here too, right? It's not just the knowledge of do you know what's right or wrong. It's actually feeling empowered to do something about it. And I think elevating the training, elevating a policy within the training adds to the gravitas, adds to the conviction of the organization to say, hey, employees, this matters. I need you to not only go through this and learn from it, but I need you to acknowledge that you understand our data security policy because this affects everyone in the company. I want to be respectful of time. We just have a couple minutes left, so I'd like to thank Dr. Haymeyer, Jeremy Beckman, and Eitan Clower for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who we're running low on time, so we have some questions come in, and either the nature of those questions were policy or legal specific, in which case we'll follow up. Otherwise, we've addressed them directly via chat. You're welcome to keep typing in questions before I shut this off in about 5 minutes, and we'll get to those after the event. Just to conclude, obviously, we're a business that is in the expertise of training and online conduct training specifically. And LawRoom's been around for 20 years. We are the leading conduct training provider in the university market. We serve over 500 colleges and universities, and we'll train over 1.5 million faculty, students, employees in 2015 alone. And this is our expertise, and I hope that everyone got to see and feel our passion for what we do today. If you'd like to see our course, the new data security course that we're calling Checkpoint, you can see a preview of it. I put it in the chat box on the right-hand side. There's a bit.ly link that goes to a YouTube page where you can watch it's 57 seconds, so it's a short clip, give you a sense of the look and feel. We also have a great white paper that I mentioned at the beginning that's under handouts, also in the right sidebar toward the bottom. Download that. It'll give you some information, not product-specific information about us or LawRoom-specific information, but information about what goes into the creation of a great and effective data security training program, and obviously much of that was touched on today. Last thing, if you'd like a demo, and many of you have requested demos already, but if you'd like a demo of our new training program, whether you're a small SMB or you're a major corporation, major enterprise, we're happy to set aside some time later today, tomorrow, next week, whenever it fits in your schedule. Do me a favor, type in demo into the chat or the question box, and we'll reach out to you. There'll also be an opportunity via email so you can receive those notifications, or we can engage you that way, and you can request a demo via email, but wanted to give an opportunity to take those requests during the webinar as well. That's it. We did it, I think, just perfectly top of the hour. Thanks again to the LawRoom team for joining us. Thanks to the over 150 people who attended the webinar today. If you have any questions, submit via the question box now. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thanks.